I want to talk briefly about my best 10 images of 2019. Run intro. So I just wanted to say before I start, I'm going to make this as brief as possible as well, because I know these things can take time. I think I've made a video last year that was whatever 30 minutes based on the 10 images from last year, so I'm just going to try and trim it down and be as quick as possible. Now these are in no particular order, so I'm just going to go through them. So the first one I'm going to present is this one here. Now this was taken at the Dark Peak area of the Peak District in Derbyshire, sort of Froggatt's Edge. Now I'd spent the day out there, and the weather was sporadic. It was sunny, then it was cloudy. It was quite windy, a cold day, but because of this, the light was changing on the land constantly and throwing up all sorts of interesting things to point a camera at, basically. But I loved this. Now the reason I love this image is because this is a prime example of finding a composition with a zoom, with a telephoto off in the distance, and sort of understanding the skyline and understanding how to make compositions that aren't necessarily immediately obvious to you. And this is very much kind of one of those images that just stood out after having scanned the horizon and had a look at what was available to me. And this little shot here that my wife took with her iPhone is me setting up this shot, and you can see, if I just superimpose this image over the top of it, you can actually see that you can actually see where in the landscape this composition was, where I saw it, and what I meant to do with it. And but I'm pleased with it. It's very moody sky. It was very moody whilst we were there. Just really pleased with this image. So the settings on this it was a 70-200 zoom, f4L. It was at 109 millimeters, and it was at f7.1, ISO 100, and it was a 250th of a second shot exposure as well. So quite pleased with this. And that's shot one. Shot two. Now this is a shot that I took at a place called Hackford Woods in North Yorkshire. Possibly slightly unremarkable image at first glance, but there's lots I like about it. I really like how the reflective symmetrical elements kind of make the image, the way that the whole frame is filled with the story of the image, the use of thirds, the vanishing points, the split in tonal values, and even though everything looks in focus, I love the suggestion of the depth of field split by the foreground and background detail. I could go on. I really like this shot. It was taken with a 10-stop filter on because it was a really bright day. I wanted to flatten out the river very slightly. There was a bit of movement in the river, so I knew what I wanted to do with this shot, and ended up with this beautiful image. I really like it. I've written a bit of a blog on my website about this shot as well, breaking down the shot and sort of how and why I like it and why I think it works as an image. I'll leave that in the links below if you want to go and have a look at that on my website. So that's shot two, Hackford Woods. This image was taken locally to me. It's a place where a lot of people walk the dogs or go and walk. It's a very beautiful place, a beauty spot if you like, on the River Calder, where the Calder and Hebble Canal meets the river, local to me. And the light was fading. It was kind of golden hour in the evening. I loved the way that the light was cast across this bridge. I just found the bridge quite interesting. So what I did, there was lots of people walking about, so I set the camera up, and I made this composition. I love the way that it's split into thirds at a 45-degree angle. That's quite interesting. So the eye follows the whole image round, and I just needed somebody to walk through it. And of course I waited for a while, and as I've said, it was a popular area for walkers and stuff, but nobody came. So I was with other photographers at the time, and I just got a couple of friends and said to them, can you just get across this bridge and walk back so I can make this composition, because I had a vision of what I wanted to do, and it was very much this image, with a couple of walkers kind of blurred out in the background, silhouetted. I love the fact that there's a little bit of bokeh, or bokeh, or how you want to pronounce it, just in the rivets on the floor in the foreground. And the focal point was kind of like, I left the focal point. I made the focal point sort of midway between the subject matter of the couple walking through and sort of the real foreground, which kind of gives it a kind of an ethereal feel. It's it was very deliberate. That was, it was kind of, I didn't want to focus on the actual subject matter. I wanted to have a conversation about sort of the space and sort of the material of the bridge and just the whole. I don't know. It's a bit hard to explain, but I certainly made it sort of. As you can see, the focal point is kind of midway between where I am, the photographer, and the couple walking across the bridge, and it just gives it a bit of. It's like I said, a bit of an ethereal feel to the whole image. So it's a lovely composition, great leading lines, small amount of bokeh, silhouettes and 45-degree split thirds, and a midway focal point which makes the whole scene slightly ethereal. And I'm really happy with the shot. It turned out really nice. So the settings were, there's a 70 to 200 zoom, f4, 70mm, 4.5 f4.5, ISO 400, and it's 1/8000th of a second shot. This was, yeah, really like it. So that's that one. Moving on. So this one, this image was kind of came out of that workshop. Actually, it was I was on a different day, but at the end of the workshop we'd be on. We'd taken some photographs of the trains coming through and the local train line, and I wanted to return. To get a daytime shot of a train coming by, but I wanted a long exposure. I wanted something a bit unique, a bit different from what I usually shoot. And I had this vision in my head of what I wanted to shoot at this location. So I went back and sort of it was the fading light of the day, because I needed it to be a little bit dark in order to make this shot. Not dark, but it's sort of dullish. And the trick basically was trying to get this long exposure during daytime and get it just as I wanted it. The timing had to be absolutely perfect. I had a really good idea about what I wanted to do. This shot is absolutely nailed it. Actually, I really like this shot. It's exactly what I was after. But technically, just trying to get it absolutely right took a lot of thinking about in terms of timings. Now, what made it difficult with the trains were coming through at different speeds. So like you couldn't really do. You could set your timings for a train coming through and go, that's perfect, I know what I'm doing, and the next one comes through, and the next train could come through slowly, which kind of messed everything up that you were doing. So there was a bit of luck involved as well, but I definitely nailed what I was after. And I love this shot, I just like it. The difficulty with this shot was, when you do long exposures at night time, you have a black canvas to paint light on, basically, because there's very little light. But in this instance, you are very much dealing with a lot of light, so information's being burnt to your sensor constantly. So in order to set the shot up and get it just as you want, there's a bit of technical jiggery pokery and just a bit of messing around. Like I said, I did a few test shots with trains coming through, and then eventually I got this image, which I just absolutely love. I think it's quite interesting. And I like the composition, the way that the whole thing sort of fills the frame and cuts through the image that you're looking at. It's from edge to edge. Yeah, interesting shot. It was fun to make, and quite pleased with the result. Now, this is a beautiful morning. I spent at a place called Johnshaven in Scotland, and I got up when it was dark. The weather forecast was good. I picked a spot previously because I was staying locally. I knew where the sun was rising. I knew kind of how it was going to present, where it was going to present, and I went out and sat on the harbour and made this image. And I think it was just, this shot kind of represents just for me, just being out, the fact that I like to spend time on my own within this kind of setting, capturing this kind of imagery. There's nothing more beautiful, I don't think, than capturing a sunrise on the coast. Don't know what it is. It's just, a sunrise or a sunset indeed. Those moments at the beginning or the end of the day where light's concerned in coastal regions just always offers something beautiful and interesting. Of course, the weather has to be right, but it's no good if it's dull and overcast. Actually, that's not necessarily true. You can still get a good image then, but you know what I mean. It was when you've got great light, when you've got stunning light, and you're in a stunning location. There's nothing better. There's nothing better to witness, and it's great fun to photograph. And I've done a YouTube video based on this image as well. So if you want to go and have a look at that, I'll post it here somewhere. I don't know where are we here, there, up there somewhere, and you can have a look at that video. from that morning. But I like this image, beautiful image. It is what it is. I like the way that the clouds are sort of pointing towards the sun, and the coastal buildings are also pointing towards the sun. I like the composition that I made. It just works. It was slightly long exposure. I think I used a graduated filter just to give me a bit more timing, just so I could play with the timings a little bit better than I could without it. And just got this image, and I'm pretty pleased with it. The settings were, I was using a 17 to 40 wide angle. It was at 30mm. It was at f22, ISO 50, and for 1.3 seconds exposure. And this is the shot that I got, and I quite like it. It's a good shot. This next one, this image is, we've spent some time up in the Lake District during October, and you can't fail to get good photographs when you spend any time at all in the lakes. And this was looking at Melbreak over Crummock Water at dusk, that blue hour. And I love the slither of light that kind of goes through the centre of this. I love how the light worked, and it looks kind of otherworldly. Sometimes when you take photos, and you know what you're doing at the time, and you make a composition, and you pull the trigger and you take it home. When I was editing this, I was looking at it and just thinking to myself, I don't know what it is, but it just looks otherworldly. What do I mean by that? It just kind of I don't know. I like my sci-fi programs and stuff like that, and I think, this could be on some bizarre planet somewhere. I don't know why I feel like about this image, but yeah, there's something about it. But it's beautiful. We can't fail, like I said, in the Lake District to make stunning imagery when you're surrounded with such beauty. But I'm happy with this shot, and like I say, I like the composition. I love the light. I love those sparse little clouds tucked in behind the hill, Melbreak, and yeah, I like this one. This is one of my favourite shots from this year, definitely. The settings for this was 17 to 40, at 17mm it was, f22, ISO 50, and it was a 27-second exposure on manual. This is called That Yellow Boat. This is up in Johnshaven in Scotland. Now, while spending time up there, I watched this little boat go out on numerous occasions, as we had a cottage overlooking the harbour. Boats would go out at all hours and fetch lobster pots and bring them back with their haul, and this boat just stood out. I'd seen him leave on, like I say, on numerous occasions and come back with his catch, but this was just such a pretty little boat. The aesthetic qualities of this boat were as such that I wanted to photograph it, and I wasn't the only one that appreciated it as well. I met a gentleman there who was an artist, and he was sketch painting this exactly the same scene as I've presented in this composition. And he was doing a cracking little painting of it as well. So he'd seen the same thing that I'd seen, and it's simple really. It's just moored up in the harbour, but I kind of liked, because it was always more or less moored in the same place. But on this particular occasion, there wasn't any other cluttered boats around it. There were other boats. There usually would have been boats either side of it, but they were out, and it was a nice bright day. It was kind of late on, so we were moving into golden hours. You can tell, like you probably tell that by the colour in the image, and I just like this image. Just made it. Just sometimes things just jump at you and you go, yeah, I'm taking that. So it was handheld. It was a 70-200 zoom at 70mm, f5.6, ISO 500, and it was 1/2000th of a second exposure. Aperture priority, handheld, and yeah, bump. There it is. I love this image. It's just lovely. Oranges and blues always tend to work together, I find, in photography. I don't know why. I think I might have to do a YouTube video about that at some point. Oranges and blues, used in cinematic techniques all the time, by the way. So yeah, look out for blue juxtaposed against orange and yellows in films. Very stylized. Yeah, you'll find them. They're there. Okay. Next image was. This image was not so long ago. This is out at Bauer Reservoir in the Peak District, and we arrived very early in the morning, me and a friend of mine. We set up, and there's just this stunning mist across the reservoir. It was just absolutely beautiful. Now, this image represents a kind of a bit more of a muted colour image. I like my big bold colours, yeah. I'm very, very fond of that in photography. This morning all the colours were muted and it was very misty and very pale, and yeah, and so it presented sort of a different scene than I'm used to, I suppose. But I made 2 or 3 images, 2 or 3 compositions. You can see them in this video here. If I just post that above me, you can go and check this out. The morning we were there. But I like this image. I like the way these images turned out. This one specifically, I like the composition. I like the stillness of it. Like I say, I like the muted colours in it. I've been big on reflections this year. It seems to be a reoccurring theme in my photography this year, reflections. But I just like it. It's like I say, it was a 17-40 L f4L. Is it 23 millimeters? f14 ISO 50 for 0.3 seconds, and that was manual, and it was on a tripod. Yeah, very. I love this image. Absolutely love this image. This is up for sale if you want to go and buy print. By the way, in my print shop on my website. I'll leave the details in the section below if you want to go and have a look at some. If you want to buy a print of mine, that would be amazing. So yeah, that's available for a print if you'd like to buy a print. But I love this image. Fantastic image. Sometimes you don't know why you appreciate images. Sometimes why do things sit with you? Sometimes you can't explain that. I think this is just slightly bit different than the kind of image that I'm used to making. Like I said, because of those muted colours, just presented itself as it was, and all I needed to do was turn up and take the photo. So all good. This was on the same day as the last image that I made at Lady Bauer. Now, we were walking back to the car. We'd done some shots in and around the area, and I saw these little reeds, these sort of water plants sticking up through the water, and it was kind of frustrating because I knew there was a composition to be had there, and it took me a little while to find it. And I did that basically by putting live view on the back of the camera and just moving the camera around on a tripod till I found something pleasing. And when I found it, I took this photo, and this is the photo that I like. I did a portrait one as well, but I like this landscape one better. It just seems to be a bit of a better composition as far as I'm concerned. But again, it's just different. It's different to sort of the shots that I've been taking. I like the colours that are involved in it. I just like the composition, the way the eye goes around the whole frame. It's just interesting. It sits well with me as an image, and I like the reflections. Again, there's those reflections again. The reoccurring theme. I'll have to watch that actually, see if that happens next year. But yeah, just really sits well with me. I like this image a lot. And last but not least, this image was... we were leaving the Lake District. It was the time when we were up at the lakes. We were driving home, me and my family. We'd been up there for a while. We'd stayed right north in North Cumbria for a little bit of a break. And like I say, we're literally just heading back to the motorway to drive home. And we were going through Grasmere. And I looked out the window and I looked across at this scene and just like... literally slammed the brakes on. Found a lay-by. The next lay-by that I found in the road, I just parked the car up and grabbed my kit and disappeared. I said bye to my wife and child. I said I won't be long, and disappeared. And I'm glad I did, because this was what was presented to me when I looked out the window. Just absolute stunning scene this is, of reflections on an autumn day on Grasmere Lake in the Lake District, and it's just absolutely beautiful. Took my time, set the camera up, made 2 or 3, 4 or 5 maybe compositions. I've got some other shots that I like as well at the same time, but this was my favourite. This is one that stood out for me, and I love that fact. It's just about being aware. I've said so before in other videos of mine that there are times where I'll just jump out of the car and disappear and take a photograph because I've seen something in the landscape, and this very definitely was one of those occasions. Driving home, I was just about to settle into sort of a 2-hour drive. Looked across the lake, saw this and just went, oh my lord, I've got to stop and take that photo. Like I say, hopped out of the car, spent some time taking taking a few shots, taking a few compositions, met a few people, met a few other togs that were there. They'd seen the same thing, but I'm happy with the shot. It's an absolute stunningly beautiful shot, and again, Lake District, can't go wrong really. So this was a 70-200 zoom at 104mm, f16 ISO 50, and it was a 0.5 second shot. and there it is, very beautiful. Anyway, they're my 10 shots for 2019. These are the shots that probably just stuck out for me. There's other shots that I loved. It's always difficult presenting sort of 10 best or 10 favourites. I don't really put them in any order. These are shots that kind of stood out for me and that I've really appreciated. They've got nice stories behind them in terms of just being out in the world and taking these images. I've got good memories that go with these images. And that's always important, I think, as well. But yeah, these are the ones that have stuck out for me when I wanted to do this 10 best. So they're my 10 favourites for 2019. It's been an interesting year, been a good year. I'm looking forward to 2020, a new decade in photography. Should be good. If you've not subscribed already, please hit subscribe and hit the bell for updates to my channel. If you have subscribed, I really appreciate it. Thanks for being on board. I wish you a very, very, very prosperous 2020, and I look forward to having you on board in the new year. And until next time, take care. Bye for now.